Well, thank you. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. This is our third session around. Well, sounds a little feedback in me. Our third session around creating our strategic vision. This is a second sort of sort of more focused session. So what I would the plan for today is I do want to take a little time with apologies for those who are regular attenders. I'm going to repeat a few general points about where we're at. Repetition is good, and for those who only just joined us, it get them some context for how we got to where we are today. But the most of today is going to be focused on one of our three draft strategic values, and talking about the language of that. Do we capture it well? And then thinking a little bit beyond that to if this value represents what we're about. What should our goals and strategies be as we move forward? So I want to just say a few preliminary things. Once again, today I want to welcome our folks from University of Maine at Machias, who I assume are out there. They have been at the last two meetings. We've been really pleased with the level of engagement from folks at Machias in both of the first two conversations. Thanks to the miracle of technology, they can connect, you can connect, anyone can connect from anywhere where there's a satellite connection. To this conversation. So this is the same as the last two. There's two ways to connect. You can get on the web and go to that website and follow the instructions, or you can text a message to that number. And in the back, Jeff, Jake, and Monique will be looking at those, gathering those. When we come to more formal type of time for Q&A, we'll be periodically asking what they're hearing from out there. We've also got folks connecting via, so there's folks connecting via Zoom at UMaine Machias. And the last couple of ones, we've also had folks at other places. Our cooperative extension offices have connected and sent in some messages. So I'm encouraging those folks out there in the Netherlands to do that again today. One of the things, what other preliminary remarks do I want to make? That's probably good enough. So we're going to start, and today I'm going to kind of review where we're at in our thinking about creating the strategic vision for the University of Maine, and eventually a plan for how we move forward. Let me start again with one sort of general comment. You'll notice here it says for our little flag, ours, the University of Maine's logo, and you don't see over here University of Maine Machias. And we've received some feedback about that, so I want to address it early and tell you the thinking behind that. We debated this. This wasn't an oversight. It wasn't like, oh, we forgot to put the Machias logo on there. I think, or one of the opportunities created by our creating a new vision for the university is thinking of us as the university that's inclusive of a regional campus, the University of Maine at Machias. I think it helps us move forward with language where we talk about the university, and we all know that that's inclusive of our regional campus, the University of Maine at Machias, as opposed to saying University of Maine and the University of Maine at Machias. It's a small thing and semantic, but the latter emphasizes two areas. Our vision is to be more integrated as we move forward, recognizing the things that are unique about the University of Maine Machias, the things that they'll continue separate from us, the things that we'll do that won't integrate with them, but then there'll be a lot, our vision is, and that there'll be in greater integration as we move forward. That vision is consistent with at least one person there, the head of campus, Andy Egan, so that's good, right? You at least got one thinking that way. But I also, I don't want to make light of it. I know that some folks feel differently, and that should be part of our thinking, right? Is this the best way to move the institutions forward, and what are our alternatives? When the president and I kicked off the public phase of this initiative, we tried to lay out quickly a little bit about what's happening nationally in our state and locally that are the context within which we need to develop our vision for the future of the university. And nationally, there's a variety of things going on. There's the fact that there's a need, the need for folks with post-secondary degrees grows and continues to grow. Maine specifically, but in the United States generally, the types of the economy that we develop there's growing numbers of job opportunities, career opportunities that are associated with post-secondary degrees, bachelor's degrees, graduate degrees. And we have a role in fulfilling that. Other things that are happening nationally are changes in the funding landscape. That's an ongoing challenge around how much federal funding, how much the federal government is going to continue to support higher education and continue to support research and scholarship, and in what form. And that's an ever-evolving picture. I was just, most of my day today was at a chief academic officer meeting of the University of Maine system. Don't you wish you could have been there? But for those 5.5 hours. But one part that was actually quite interesting, one part that was very interesting was a presentation by a consulting group, Hanover Consulting, that the system has a contract with. And they went through a variety of things. But one thing was, in the last 5 years, the decrease in federal support for higher education in the United States. And because it's late in the day, my memory is not so sharp. It's on the order of $4 to $5 billion. Don't quote the exact amount, but it's a significant drop. That's a challenge, obviously, to us, and it's a challenge to us fulfilling all parts of our mission. Other pieces that are changing in the national landscape have to do with how higher ed is delivered and who it's delivered to. There are now, we should say that eventually there'll be national universities. There are national universities now. Southern New Hampshire University has 100,000 students enrolled, and they have a goal of 300,000. Purdue, as you know, I'm sure have known, bought out Kaplan, and now is Purdue Global, and has offices all throughout the United States and places around the world, including in Bangor, Maine. You can go, if you go in September, and play in the Bangor Area Chamber of Commerce Golf Tournament. The top donor or the top sponsor is Purdue Global. Not a thrilling thing for the provost to be standing there with his golf clubs going, wait a minute. But that's the world that we're in. Our competition is not just regional any longer. So that's a change. Things that are happening within our own state. The thing that, again, I hope you all are familiar with, because we've talked a lot about it here at the university in public forums, but it's all over the changing demographics of our state. Decreasing numbers of students who are coming out of high school each year. The numbers are down and will continue to go down for at least another decade. And that crosses a line where those numbers are going down and going up are the jobs that require post-secondary education. And so how are we going to help the state to be a viable, vibrant place to live economically with those sorts of challenges? So those are all context for us thinking about our vision for the university going forward. And of course, locally, our context is about us. It's about the University of Maine system and the way it's changing. Its view, it's sort of the system, as represented by the board, has become acutely aware of this demographic shift that I've talked to you about. And that's a context within which they're looking at how the system ought to operate. And I'm sure you all, there's ideas about that. That's another piece of our context. And then, as I said, to go back to my first point, one of our pieces of context that's different now is we have a regional campus. And we've not had it in this format before. So a lot has changed, and a lot will continue to change. So as we've been thinking about building a strategic vision for the university going forward, there's been a lot of, we've had, and many people, a lot of conversations about what that should look like. And one of the things we came upon was the idea that as a university, we ought to be, one thing that could help us to do this, is be to articulate what our values are. We think these are our values, and then as we move forward to think about our goals, we can always go back and say, do these align with what we said was important to us? Do they align with what we say were our values? And as we think about strategies to meet those goals, once again, we want to be grounded in what we've said is important. Now, we're using the term strategic values, and we're using that term because we're challenging ourselves to think about values or articulate them in ways that are strategic. That is, they're forward-looking, and that these values will guide us in helping to make decisions about how we prioritize amongst the many opportunities and challenges that we're going to face and how we're going to face them. So, to have this conversation going, as you maybe know, we identified three strategic values: fostering learner success, creating and innovating for Maine and beyond, and growing and stewarding partnerships. Now, when President Farini Mundy and I, a couple weeks ago, stood in this room and talked about this, some of the feedback we got online and elsewhere was, well, that's just teaching, research, and service. All you're doing is just relabeling what we do. And so part of the answer is yes, right? I would hope our values would line up with our mission, right? I would, of course they should. Is this just an exercise in relabeling things? Well, that's where we're going to challenge ourselves to say, no, we don't want it to be just an exercise. Instead of saying our mission is teaching, our mission is now fostering learner success. It's saying, well, what does that, by using that term and defining it, how does that guide the way we're going to think about achieving our goal of fulfilling the teaching mission, right? And we had a meeting last week to talk quite a bit about that. We talked about the different kinds of learners that we need to make part of our, a greater part of our makeup here if we're going to help the state and be successful. So today we're focusing on creating and innovating for Maine and beyond. And this idea, again, is that, of course, this is research. Of course, this is research and development. But we want to think about this, or we want to challenge ourselves to think about that in this broader, more contemporary context, and to think about how we would define how we value research, or how we value creating and innovating for Maine and beyond, in such a way that we will identify goals that will help us to advance. So how do we hope to do this? Well, what we want to do is first look at, words matter. We want to look at how we articulate and talk about this value, because growing out of that, we will then say, okay, if this is true, then what should be our goals, and how should we achieve them? I think, oh no, I don't see it. So this time we didn't get anything for folks to write on. That's all right. So what I will do is we're going to have a conversation about this this value today. What I'm going to invite you to do is, well, actually, at any point you can shout out something. At some points, I'll actually stop and ask you to shout out something. But I want you to we'll post all this, and I'd like this conversation to continue beyond today. So, what is this? This is, I would call this, it should say, draft across here, because this is a draft. This was grew out of conversations that primarily came out of the President's Cabinet, and folks tried to shape those conversations into a paragraph to say, how would we, if creating and innovating for Maine and beyond is one of our strategic values, what do we mean by that? Let's take it beyond those small set of words. So what I'm going to do is talk you through this to at least try to capture what we were trying to get at when we laid things out in the way that we did. Then the next thing we'll do is we'll look at, get some thoughts about what you think about that. Whoops. Okay. So, at the core of the university's mission is the creation of new knowledge. Fulfillment of this mission takes a wide variety of forms. So, reinstating basically our mission. This is core to being a research university. As all of you know, we are the research university in the state of Maine. That this is at the core of who we are and what we do. And also then very early on recognizing that this takes a whole wide variety of forms. As I said earlier, words matter. And sometimes when you say research, some people feel like they're being excluded. Maybe we should use the word scholarship and research and scholarship. But you probably have opinions about that. My opinions vary from day to day, so I'm inconsistent. But this idea that this is at the heart of our mission, and that research isn't just getting grant dollars, although that's very important. And research isn't just writing books, although that's very important. And research is inclusive of the creative arts. It's inclusive of community engaged, partner engaged research. It's inclusive of working with business and industry to help them meet their needs. Creating and innovating has this covers a broad array of areas. this section, the first part, the first part, the goal was to make clear about our land and sea grant mission. That as a land and sea grant university, we're not only producing knowledge, but we have a special responsibility to be mindful of our state. So to a part of our charge, and it has been since our creation, is to create knowledge that impacts our state, that helps to grow the state's economy. That as that land and sea grant mission has evolved over the 150 plus years that we've been a land grant university, it's inclusive of research and scholarship that impacts the social aspects of our state, the cultural aspects of our state. That we're mindful that's a significant piece of our mission as we go about and carry out our research. But when we purposely then wanted to say, though, that the impact of our creativity or our research scholarship isn't limited to the state's borders. We recognize that our work it already is at a level of national and international impact, and there are scores of examples around campus. I'm sure you're aware of them. But I think an important piece is that this part impacts this. We are more effective at impacting the economy, the culture, the social aspects of our state because we are doing things at a national and international level. These are not, in my view, competitive. These are synergistic, right? And so we are more effective at our land grant mission because we have collaborators around the world. We are more effective because we are our work impacts far beyond our borders. Whoops, I keep doing that twice. I'll get it. There we go. Innovation is built into our genetic makeup and therefore is present in all aspects of our operation. So I came up with this one, and so I'll own it because someone has said to me, "Is it really built into our genetic makeup?" It's awfully hard to change things around here, and so that's true. However, we'd like it to be built in our genetic makeup, right? It's an aspirational statement. Let me tell you a little bit about why would you stick this sentence in there? And so the thinking was, as we move forward, what we want to do is to take this mindset of being a scholar, of being a researcher, and apply it not only in our scholarship, but in looking at how we operate as an institution. The President and I have talked quite a bit about how do we create an environment at the University of Maine where people have the opportunity to try things out, right? And to fail, to steal the innovation engineering folks' phrase, to fail fast and fail cheap. And how can we learn from that? We recognize that we're a big bureaucracy and we're part of an even bigger bureaucracy. And that presents challenges. But rather than be defeated by that, we want to say, look, one of our goals, one of the things we value, I should say, is, whether it's built in our genetic makeup or not, well, one of the things we value is that we want to bring innovation to everything that we do. We want to be looking at how we, at our pedagogies. We want to be looking at our operations. People have heard me bemoan the fact that if you want to create a new degree program at the University of Maine, there's 34 steps to it, and it takes on average about 2 years and 4 months to do that. Not lightning fast. Are there ways that we can look at and be innovative in that area? Are there ways that we learn as a research university and it applies to our internal operation? That's one of the goals. It's a value that we'd like to be inclusive as we think about who we want to be moving forward. Now, this might be a little bit of the Department of Redundancy department, but we are trying to emphasize again, and the first sentence captured it, but here a little more clearly by example, to say that our community is made up of a broad array of folks. That is, it's designers, builders, makers, discoverers, and they're working in a variety and remarkable. The contexts within which our faculty and staff work are very, very, very broad. And again, we're reiterating that this is the kind of work we as an institution champion, and we apply it in the service of our goals. All right. So that's the sentence. That's the phrase. What I want to do with the time we have when I want to, well, not stop talking, but slow down on my talking, and invite you to have input. We want to talk through 4 broad questions. First is I'd like to get input on how well do you think that statement captured the strategic value, or a strategic value that should guide the university's development. Okay. Now again, I don't want to exactly rewrite it here, but I do want us to throw out some ideas. We'll have folks recording them, and there on the yellow sheets we'll have people recording them. Well, it'll all be recorded. But we want to then use this to try to reshape these messages, to say, well, okay, did we get it right? What else ought to be included in how we articulate this strategic value? Or if you wanted to argue that no, this doesn't capture it all, and we ought to have this ought to be broken into different strategic values. I'd like to at least invite that kind of conversation. And then to take some time to say, well, okay, if that or some variation of that is what we value, then what should our goals be? What should we be pursuing that would realize that goal, that would actualize that value, right? And then I want to distinguish that a little bit from strategy, right? So to take somewhat of a concrete example, we might say, well, one indicator, one goal could be that our research expenditures, which hit last year were $129 million, we should set the goal of having $200 million in research expenditures. That may be a good goal, right? The distinguished then strategies would be, we need to have a focused hiring effort on faculty in certain core areas or in cluster areas. It's a strategy to do that. So just to distinguish, we want to talk a bit about goals and a little bit about how to get there. And then I'd also like to hear your thoughts about measurement, and it does tie to these goals, but about what should be the key indicators or benchmarks. When President Freeney Monday and I spoke at the first get-together like this, what we talked about was building a strategic plan that is what's the word? Flexible, that can change, right? That we're not tied in to our goals and strategies, because we got to be ready to say the context might change. We also want to say, well, we don't want to have a strategic plan that says these are our strategies to get to the goal, and to hell if they're working or not, these are the strategies we're doing, right? We want to be able to say these are our strategies in year 1, and what ought to change? Let's look at how we're doing, and we want that to be very public. What should be the key indicators? What should be growing, changing, so that we can say, yeah, we've got the right strategies here, or no, this is not working. How do let's go out and do a concerted effort in this area. So what would be the key indicators? Now again, for a university, you could come up with hundreds, some thousands probably, and we may end up there. I hope we don't. I'd like us to get, I don't know what they should be, but I'd love us to have a manageable number on a dashboard, is my sort of vision in my mind, that anyone can see where we're at, and we can be coming back to the campus to say, hey, here's how we did, and you know what, we moved the needle here, we didn't move the needle much there, and have that kind of dialogue on an ongoing basis. I think most people know that we took the time to evaluate the Blue Sky Plan, and it was a really valuable learning exercise. And one of the things that we learned was you shouldn't do that every 5 years. Right? If you set out some goals and you said these are your strategies, you need to be looking at those more frequently. And we did that. We did do that, to be fair, during the Blue Sky years. We did do that, but we did it locally and not so much here as an institution. And our vision, our goal, is for us to be able to get there for the University of Maine as we move forward. All right. So, well, let me turn back to here. Before we get into talking about the first question, any general comments, questions, challenges? Okay. So I have, I heard my name, but I didn't. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I did give one then, but our microphone doesn't work. So shout it out there. There you go.
Hear you now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, so just a general question that we got texted in, is there room for other values?
Yes, is the answer to that. Yes, there is. And again, send them forward, make the case. I'll give one example that we've had actually quite a bit of conversation about, which is, shouldn't diversity and inclusiveness be a value for the institution? And I'm confident to speak for the president on this one. Yes, we all believe it should be. The thing that we're kind of debating is, should that be integrated into these core strategic values, or should we set up a separate value? And again, give me the day, the time, whether I've had a coffee or a beer, I'll take different sides of that argument. So yes, I mean, as an example, we definitely are interested in that. What we'd like to hear is, what's missing here? And if we organize these in a different way, or if we came to something different, how would that help us to articulate goals and strategies? And again, we're very open to the idea that it might. So thanks for asking that question. Any other? All right, so we have Angela and Amber. Oh, no, we don't have Amber. Sorry, Renee. We have Renee. Amber was over there. I thought it was going to be Amber. Renee, who are going to help and jot down to keep track of things. So the first thing I want to do is spend a little time on this first question. So there's the draft way we've articulated this strategic value. What do you think? Yeah, Owen. And there's some microphones going around, and that's where Amber will be, and James. Thank you.
I'm always willing to jump things off, Jeff. Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. I find the statement interesting, but I'm going to make the statement that I think you've missed a major first step.
Okay.
And so I come back to the first sentence. At the core of the university's mission is the creation of new knowledge. Mm-hmm. I think you have to take a step backwards and ask, how do we do that? And I would suggest the missing piece is that we create a culture of learning and a culture of investigation, and that really the first step is the creation of a kind of intellectual engagement that then allows us to move into this kind of vision that you have. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's just about education, but it's about the way in which we engage with and create learners, creators, experimenters, all of those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And that even though that's kind of built in a little bit, mm-hmm. I would say it needs to be much more explicit.
Okay. Thank you. So one bit of feedback I got from the last one is, I thought this was a conversation. How come you're talking so much? So I'm going to try not to respond to every comment with comment, but I will with this one. I think that's an excellent point. And one thing I did want to say, and it does, we put down these strategic values in these areas. One thing we're trying to capture is that there is so much overlap amongst them. And so I don't think you were here last week, because I'm sure you would have had a question or comment, because I know you. And I don't remember you having a question or comment. Last week when we were talking about fostering learner success, that was one of the things we did talk about, which was how do we create an environment where everyone is a learner? Faculty, staff, visitors to the campus, students, of course. How are we all in that mindset of challenging ourselves to be ongoing learners, innovators, and thinkers? So it's a great point, and we got to think about how do we convey that. So thank you. Other. Emily.
That there are things that we know that aren't actually doing us much good, like that the planet is warming. We know that. Mm-hmm. Yet, what is the mechanism for taking action? So when we move from creating to innovating, it seems like there's some step of understanding, transformation into sort of from knowing to doing. And I see bits of that, but the innovating sounds like it needs some other thing that happens. And maybe that comes from the intellectual content that Owen's talking about. I'm not sure that's the whole piece.
No, I think I get what you're going to have. And, Yeah, not to minimize, but your example makes me think about it. Research here at the University of Maine about climate change is, has been important for the international world to kind of understand this, and hopefully some innovation to help us get out of this mess will come out of that. But the message doesn't quite capture that, the importance of the basic understanding. I mean, it doesn't quite capture, at least adequately, the importance of knowledge. Basic research is a dull way to put it, but knowledge just for knowledge's sake, that can be foundational to creation. So I'll do it right now, but I'll challenge you to help us think about how do we include that in the way we're talking about this. Now, this will cue your thinking. Last week when we were talking about fostering learner success, there were two people, but their comments were met with sort of, who said, well, that's kind of a dull way you've written this. And so I was mindful of that in reading this one, and it might be as well. That part of the goal, again, I said we're using the term strategic values because we're trying to get people forward thinking. But there, these things, creating a vision for a university, creating a strategic plan serves a whole variety of purposes. One of which is to inspire people to be thinking, so I'm open to thoughts about helping with that piece of language too, or piece of the way we talk about this.
I have a couple back here.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
So one comment is we are also a space grant university.
Okay.
And then I have a comment with a question attached to it. Last week, Chancellor Page shared a draft UMS Declaration of Strategic Priorities with a very short window for response that closes tomorrow. You say that words matter and that at the core of the university's mission is the creation of new knowledge. However, the system's draft strategic priorities barely mention research and only in the context of economic development. This is obviously very important, but how might yoking research exclusively to the creation of new jobs limit UMaine's self-understanding of our research mission?
In many ways, and I'm also very concerned about that. So not to make light of it, that's a great comment. And like many great comments, other folks have said, we've heard variations of that in this short window of time. I can respond with a couple things. But yesterday, 2 days ago, President Freeney Mundy came to the Dean's Council meeting, and one of the things we discussed was this document that had come out of the Board of Trustees. And that was a point that Dean's made as well, that graduate education is almost missing from that document, and research is almost missing, except for in that very narrow context. She was mindful of that as well. What I can say is thanks for that input. You've said it here. Our president has heard it. If you have an opportunity to say it to anybody else, please say it, because I am concerned about that as well. If that's the narrow way that we look at it, it certainly doesn't emphasize the importance of research to the economic future and the cultural future of the state. So my short answer is right on. I agree. Any other thoughts or questions about that? Okay, go ahead, Dave. Yeah. Here's.
How does that philosophy from the system level impact what we're trying to do here?
That's a great question. Thank you, because actually I was mindful of not talking too much, but I did want to say more. So I think part of so the short answer I could say I don't know, Dave, but I'll tell you what I think, what I hope will happen, right? We're engaged in this process. The system, we've gone out, we've hired. And including the system, hired Dr. Freeney Mundy to be our president. And one of if people aren't aware, as a public, one of the things the chancellor has charged her with is creating a system-wide plan for research and development. And so that's fabulous opportunity for us. I believe, I believe that this visioning and creating of our new strategic plan is also an opportunity for us to, to have an impact and inform the way the board is thinking about these things, and the future directions that the board is going. So, let me generalize a little bit further. So, this effort that we're engaged in now about creating these strategic values and then eventually goals and strategies, this is part of many, there are many initiatives that are sort of within and will feed into this, one of which is the President's charge to create this plan for the University of Maine system research. So there are other things that are going on campus as well. As everyone knows, we started an initiative around first-year student success, and I've got about 100 faculty and staff involved in working groups on that. That is going to feed into this. The research plan will feed into this. And then the goal, I put it that way, is that what comes out of the University of Maine is a strong, articulate plan that then will inform the board as it moves forward. The plan is to have our plan in place by May for the President to present it at the May Board of Trustees meeting. The hopeful is that we can impact the way they're thinking about this. But I would say off the record, but that's not very good. I'm worried. Given the statement that came out, I am worried. Because of the reason the person who texted in wrote. I am worried. Yeah, Natasha.
As I read the statement, maybe this is addressed in another way,
Yeah.
but it reads the same way that it might read if we were a startup company or some sort of company,
Yeah.
where our goal is to make knowledge and then deploy it in various ways. And I'm wondering whether it's important to us to somehow intertwine in that the sense that we are also helping others learn how to do this work and that we're inspiring others, undergraduates, graduate students, to do this work, or whether that's a separate sort.
No, I don't. I think that's a great point because I don't want it. Well, yeah, I don't want it to be separate. And again, words matter, but images matter too. And somehow, we couldn't come up with a good one, but it's some way to visually show how these things all interact, right? So this fostering learner success. One of the things is we do here better than anyone in the state of Maine is foster that kind of thinking like a researcher, to be able to have that be a significant part of your learning experience at the undergraduate, graduate level. And so it sort of interacts with that. But I do think I think we should look for ways to try to include it in here, because it is a way that we create for, or we help the state to innovate and grow, is not only by the research and scholarship that we produce, but it's by the people that we produce who go out and continue to do that. So I'll say the same thing I said to Emily. Any thoughts you have about how to articulate that, please send them in. We're very welcome to them. Yeah. Yeah.
Appreciated your point about the new competitive environment. In fact, just earlier today, I was working with some nurses at Northern Light Eastern Maine, and I asked them all where they had gone to school, and 2 had gone to Purdue. And I said, wow, how did you end up in Maine? Little did I know they had gone to Purdue and Bangor. Most had
Grew up
gone
in
to
Bangor,
Maine, so
yeah.
that was good. So I agree with the concern there, and I guess I'm just wondering, maybe this is too far ahead in your
Yeah.
thinking, but is the idea to respond to that by offering similar educational strategies, or is it to sort of say, no, we're doing something different here, or both?
So, so I'm going to use what I've learned from years of leadership in higher ed and say, we have to figure that out together. But I really mean that. I don't know the answer to that. And I think that's one of our big challenges here. Are we going to just try to do it, and out-compete them in the market? Are we going to think about how to do things different, what's unique? What are we going to seed in the market, and because we're going to do something else better than anybody else? I think those are really some of the core questions that we have to deal with. So, I mean, Jessica, my honest answer is I don't know, but I think as a campus, that's hopefully these kind of processes help us start to think about how we're going to address these. I thought I saw another. Yeah, Jane.
I don't have the answer as to how to word this, but as a representative for modern languages and classics and international affairs, I would like to see something that recognizes the beyond portion of the text, because much of the world beyond isn't English speaking. I know English is very much the language of scientific research, but it often then gets translated into other languages. And with the Canadian American Centre, we're a national resource for the study of Canada for, 35 years now. Something that supports the whole international side in some way.
Yeah, more strongly
Yes,
come through in the statement.
yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, we're ready to talk about goals or speculate about goals? Yeah, Owen.
I know I've got my 2 cents. Can I take the 3rd cent?
Does it matter if I say no?
Just two,
No, go ahead.
I think 2 quick comments. You can respond or not. One being that the statement uses creation and innovation somewhat interchangeably, and they're not. So I think some thinking about when and how we use those 2 words in the statement needs to be done, and I know you've probably done that a little bit, but I have some
Good point.
questions about how they functionally work. And the second, even though I like the phrase that you took ownership on about in our genetic makeup, I think it's an if and should be rather than is right now statement. So it
I
should
agree.
read, if innovation is built into our genetic makeup, it should therefore be present in all aspects of our operation.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with that point. And it's hard to say I aspire for it to be part of our genetic makeup. That then your metaphor falls apart, right? So, but I think it's a really good point. Yeah, James.
Coming from my innovation background, when I look at the tension you have between the work we're trying to do for the state and the work that we're bringing from globally to the university, part of looking at innovation is the type of innovations that you have. You have core innovations that keep business going on. In other words, we're improving the way that we do things. And if I look at some of the work that we do, I fear that more often than not we think of the research that we do at the university that actually applies to Maine as only the research that is currently happening to affect Maine industries today. And a bigger part of that is the capability that we have at an institution to bring knowledge globally down to the University of Maine and then bring in new thoughts, new ideas to help spur economic development in Maine. It's not just we're looking at our forestry and how to improve our forestry within Maine, but what other industries, what other sectors, what other mindsets, what other cultures can we bring to the institution to grow innovation that's going to lead us to the future rather than just maintaining the incremental improvement.
Responding to or but creating it. Yeah, that's a great point. Something that just came to my mind. You probably saw these directions about putting this on there. I'm going to have. Let's make these cards multi-use. What I hoped we'd have. I forgot to do is have this statement printed out on a sheet of paper. So I wanted to just invite you that if you have other thoughts that you don't want to shout out, you have edits you think are really great, just use this and write on them and drop them off on the table on the way out at the end of today. So let's make multiple uses of these cards. All right. Let's hear other comments. Let's go and talk a little bit about then goals. If something like this statement, mindful of the comments that folks have made about how we can improve it, is in fact one of our strategic values. Then what should we be aspiring to do? What should our goals be? How should we say yes? And we're going to actualize this value by pursuing these goals. I'm interested in your thoughts about that. I can wait as long as you can. Oh, and go ahead.
I'll always talk.
That is a true statement. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know that.
Why don't you stand up so we can make sure we hear you? And
Yes. I would say, for me, the first and primary goal is to find ways to implement this vision. Right? Because it's a great vision statement, but how does it actually then go into implementation. So I'd say the first goal should be find deliverable mechanisms and avenues for the implementation of the strategic vision.
Okay.
Or how do we find?
Yeah, yeah. So how do we find them? What are some thoughts about that? And again, they can be from the mundane to the grandiose. Right now, we're just trying to brainstorm. All right. Well, now I'll start picking. Oh, Margot.
So, you know, innovation is near and dear to my heart. And one of the things that I have always wanted to do is to create a way for the process of innovation that we worked on in the academic program and at the center to really further social justice, right? And I've been thinking about the MOU that our past president, Susan Hunter, signed with the chief of the Penobscot Nation back in May of this year. And the MOU was about joint curation of Penobscot materials that are held in various UMaine repositories. But in the first paragraph of the MOU, there's a statement to which both Susan Hunter and Kirk Francis signed on, ostensibly, that they recognize that the University of Maine sits on the traditional land of the Penobscot people. So it would seem to me that one way to have very beneficial impact socially, culturally, and probably economically down the road would be to implement some kind of ongoing public land recognition statement at the University of Maine, whether it's, you know, in a public forums or at the beginning of a year, if a student or a prospective student comes and is greeted that way at the beginning of a large meeting, or if, you know, it's the first thing you hear first year. Eventually, that's the basis. That's a new way of looking at the relationship of the University of Maine and its land grant in relationship to original people. And it's a new relationship, really, if you recognize that as a ground for ongoing justice and cultural valuing.
I like it. I'm trying to think of how to. I mean, you could try to articulate that, and we could try as a broad goal. You know, the university community. I'm having a hard time rephrasing what you said into a succinct goal. I think it could be done. Someone more
It's
clever
about
than me.
culture change at the university, and it's a way to provide a basis for knowledge that's invisible at the moment.
I like it, but I'm struggling with trying to come up. So I'll ask you: can you think of a way, right now at the moment, but think about how do we articulate that in a broad enough way that the kind of you were getting to some strategies that we might use would follow from that. You know, 'cause I've heard social justice. I've heard of incorporating or integrating indigenous knowledge into the way we think about research, creativity, and innovation. And I've also heard that that's a goal that's sort of around recognition, or is it integrated that I mean, you might say the goal is something like everyone who comes to the University of Maine recognizes the cultural background, the integration of our history, something that broadly. And those could be, those could be broad, 3 goals under a broader goal, and then you could think about different strategies of how you would achieve those. Great, thank you. Other thoughts about? Cody, oh no, sorry, go ahead.
One thought is to implement mechanisms to increase internationally sponsored research. I know it's a challenge, sorry Amanda, but
Yeah. So if we just said so the goal is then the term used was internationally sponsored. University of Maine will grow, maybe we'll put something a little more specific on that, internationally sponsored research. Right? Yeah. There's one coming behind you.
Amanda Cups. I think one of our goals, and you've kind of touched on this a little bit with Purdue Global, is really positioning ourselves in the online higher education platform. So I think that needs to be one of our major goals as far as touching and reaching people all over the world.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, that came up the other day as well, and when we were talking about fostering learner success, so we had to make more clearly this, the online, or maybe even more broadly, of how do we reach out to, beyond our traditional areas where we have educated students. Yeah, Craig.
Gettinger. This is on.
Yeah.
Centers are nice. Being the director of the Maine Folk Life Center, I say that, but speaking more broadly about large interdisciplinary multifocal centers where you pick a topic. I mean, the Climate Change Institute is successful in part because they have an issue that brings together people from many different disciplines, puts them in a physical space, at least to some degree, and allows for those new innovative approaches to major problems to develop.
Yeah.
I'm part of a very small center with a very focused area, and there are a number of them across campus. But I think finding those things that we really want to tackle and finding ways to bring people together in centers that break them out of their disciplinary homes in a physical way if possible, but at least in a institutional,
organizational way.
Is one way.
Yeah, no, that's great. So the goal could be identifying grand challenges, or whatever phrase you want to use, that the university will, then the strategies are bringing people together to try to do that. And whether we should articulate the grand challenges, what they are, or just say that one of our goals is we will identify, or we will build our strategically use some number of grand challenges as a way to guide hiring, creation of centers, and that kind of thing. I like that idea. Yeah, Susan.
So first, I just wanted to thank Margot. I really appreciated her comment, and it makes me wonder if something like that would fall better under a fourth area, where we are thinking about how teaching, research, and service, or these words, integrate into something related to equity and inclusive excellence. But the other comment I wanted to make was, in my time in education and human development, I think what was really frustrating for me often was seeing the legislature talking about things that I know we had expertise in, but not being able to draw on that either because they didn't know we had expertise in it, they're going elsewhere. So I don't know if that can be a specific goal of, trying to be that go-to for our state when they are looking for expertise that will lend to policy making, lending to, an understanding of these issues rather than going on anecdote and personal story.
Yeah, I like that. I'd like to be able to think about some way, that we are recognized as the I might even broaden it beyond the state legislature, but for agencies, for the place to go for knowledge in these areas. Other thoughts about goals, broad goals in the
And so this is sort of tying in this whole community aspect of this, and that, fostering learners in all parts of the campus community. So maybe a goal along the lines of implementing strategies to support innovation within administrative areas and student support areas. Just really to recognize that so for example, I'm in financial aid, so that our reach goes well beyond, just admissions and retention, but we're in the community, in the high schools, at the state level, advocating for financial aid legislation. So I think maybe having a goal that specifies, the non-academic areas of the community.
Yeah, I do like that, because again, that's where that phrase that I made up about our genetic makeup came in, that idea that we want to be a place where, where financial aid, as an example, is innovative and continually as that. Now, I'm trying to think again about how to articulate that, but I think there will be ways to say the University of Maine would be known for its innovation in not specifying financial aid, but in these operations or something to that effect. Thank you. Mike.
In the past decade, it's been great. There have been more and more programs to support undergraduate research,
Yep.
graduate research, and fostering and sustaining, and even having more of that certainly is part of what would support the strategic value.
Yeah, I agree. The president has thrown out the idea, could we set a goal of having every University of Maine student will have a hands-on research experience? Actually, I think that is an obtainable goal in my view. We're not so bad at it now. As you know, maybe you don't know, 1,300 of our students, undergrad and grad, presented at last year's Student Symposium, right? We've made some progress on that. Should we set that kind of goal and have a meaningful research experience as part of their experience at UMaine? D.
I just wanted to comment on Emily's. She made a comment earlier about transformative education, and I think that our goal should be that we create learners who want to go out and make a difference. And so they're using this new knowledge that we're creating and this innovation that we're coming up with, but they know how to go out and make a change when change is necessary. So I think a goal for our students would be that they become leaders in the state, that they maybe help the state see our place within the state. So I just think the word transformative, we ought to find a way to build that into the statement, or we make that a goal that our learners want to go out and make a difference.
Our learners continue to be innovative and transformative one of our goals is that they engage in that when they leave us. They continue to engage in that. Yeah, good. Yeah, John.
Yeah, I think to expand on the research piece where every student does research, I think it also needs to be experiential learning and internships as well.
Yeah.
Tie those into it just as much as the research piece.
Yeah, good. Excellent. Other thoughts about broad goals under this heading?
I have a goal.
Yeah.
I'm the messenger of a goal. UMaine will articulate our research and subject matter expertise to both internal and external audiences to promote partnerships and reputational prestige.
I think I hear that goal around raising awareness. If I try to translate that into a goal, that people will be aware of the excellence that we have in all of these areas. Yeah, something to that effect. That's great. All right, let's talk a little bit about strategies, about how to get to these goals. I know we've talked about a pretty broad array, that's fine. But I ask you to think about strategies. Now, I like to be positive and forward thinking, but those strategies could include thinking about the impediments. What are the things here that make it difficult for us to achieve the kind of goals that we've talked about? And then what might be strategies to try to address those. And again, you don't have to be very specific, but broadly. I'm going to look at Dave Townsend and say, you must have at least one idea because you talk to me about it every time you come meet with me in my office. But if you no, there's a microphone right there.
There you go.
I think we could value research productivity scholarship more than we do now, and build it into our workloads a little more creatively than we quantify teaching expectations, but we don't quantify the other half of our appointments very well, if at all.
That's a great point. So that one way is let's look internally and look at how do we set up our recognition reward structures? And are they set up in a way to incentivize and create space for people to be successful as researchers? I had two guesses of what he was going to say, and I'll say the other one for him. So his other goal is that we grow the tenure stream faculty back up to areas where they had been. And again, I wouldn't want to have any goal that said back to anything. We grow our tenure stream faculty to a point where we can achieve the kind of goals that we're after. And then we look, and then I'll take your other point, we look at the mechanisms for rewards and what are the structures we have in place for looking at workload, incentives and rewards that advance people as researchers. As we build our file. Yeah. And Nori.
As a add-on to what Dave just said, we can measure how many papers we publish, we can measure how many PhD students we graduate, and so on. But if our aim is to improve the economic well-being of state, that suggests we're doing technology transfer or starting up new companies or so on. How do we incentivize faculty to do that then?
Yeah, so part of the research mission is we want part of the mission to be inclusive of that explicitly. And then, yeah, what are the impediments and what are the ways we recognize that in things like promotion and tenure criteria? I'm gonna, okay. Oh, no, sorry, Jim.
So we know with the one university model that has been proposed and has moved forward, we know that partnerships between our campuses are going to grow, and I think for our institution it's really important that we take the lead in developing those partnerships. Otherwise, they're going to happen, and we may not be in the position of leadership that we would like to be in.
Yeah. So yeah, it's one strategy then is to try to build partnerships that advance the research mission. And then Owen, I think you had.
Yeah, I think that we all understand that in current intellectual climates, a lot of new knowledge comes from multi and interdisciplinary initiatives. So I would say one strategy is to continue to emphasize those kinds of initiatives and create mechanisms that will allow for the growth of, and I won't say multidisciplinary, I think more interdisciplinary developments are key.
I think that's an excellent point. I'm gonna expand it a little bit and suggest that I agree with that. And I think we should be looking at goals around the diversity of our faculty and staff as a way to grow our research and creative activities. There's a lot of evidence, and diversity in every form that you might think about it. Because there's lots of evidence to show that people coming at problems from diverse perspectives, not only diverse disciplinary perspectives, but diverse personal and perspectives are help and produce creativity. So I'm going to add it as a friendly complement to your point. Dee.
I think that one of the comments we've made is how do we showcase our work better, or who we are and what our place is in the state. I think we need to find ways to create events that get legislators and representatives and business community to our campus for some things that they can feel a part of what we're doing, connected to what we're doing, and where we have an opportunity to showcase our role in the economics of the state.
Yeah, that's a great.
I have a couple strategies.
Yeah, go ahead, Monique.
So one is, this is building on Margot's earlier comment. There's the idea of hosting a Maine Heritage Day in the fall, tied strongly to our research and cooperative extension.
That's great.
And then the second one is, this is about increasing innovation opportunities. We should align resources around the signature areas of excellence or for collaboration.
Other ideas? Yep.
So I didn't mean to harp on the online piece, but I think
it's all right.
Kind of taking off of what Jim had to say, like I think part of our strategy for really building that far-reaching presence is working with the other universities and really taking advantage, not really advantage, but using some of the things that they're doing really well, because that's where we can market ourselves more broadly than I think a Purdue Global could. We have expert faculty that can teach the courses that a student would receive on campus, and that's something we really need to market because other places aren't able to market that.
I think in the partnership piece, I know, and I know he's not online today because he's got a conflict, but Andy Egan, the Vice President for Student Affairs and Head of Campus at UMaine Machias, is very interested in how do we build foster collaborations amongst their faculty to help provide more research opportunities for their faculty because of their connection, because they are a regional campus of this research university, and how to like that. So I know we're going to be engaged in exploring a variety of those. All right, let's just take a few minutes to just talk about key indicators. You know, these things interact, but if you can just think a little bit about, you know, how do we know? What can we show that, yeah, this would change? Right? This would increase if we're achieving some of these goals that we've talked about. We've implemented some of these strategies. What ought we measure? Angela.
So something that comes to mind for me is not just key indicators of success, but a big part of innovation is failure.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we recognize and celebrate failure in a way that's going to empower people?
Okay.
So maybe it's a strategy, maybe it's a key indicator, but
Yeah.
I think that's something that's
That's a great point. How do we, yeah. It's hard for me to envision something on our website that says, hey, we had 100 failures this month. However, I think it's a great point because we want to, as I said, the president is very interested and I'm very interested in creating a culture where that's okay, right? And as long as that failure leads to new learning and it's bringing back, so yeah, some way to articulate that.
So to articulate that just on one specific area, if you look at the number of proposals written versus those that are funded, you know, 3/4 of them are, someone might consider failure, but if you look at what the effort went into to write that and lead to the next success.
So that's a great, yeah, so that's a great measure. Proposals submitted. Proposals rewarded is also, or awarded is also another good one, but it's measuring something slightly different, and they're both important. Margot.
This is just a little tiny add-on to that, which would be maybe in the annual report, there's a slot that says, you know, what were your, you know, unfunded proposals, what were your failed thises or that's, and what did you learn? You know, what is the learning? Capture the learning.
What came from?
What came out? You know, what's going to be the next iteration, and how's it better?
Yeah. There's you know, I'm sure anyone in organizational thinking, you know, various variations of this maxim, but you know, the idea is that you get what you measure. You know, you say we're going to measure this, and that's what you get. And sometimes, of course, there are all kinds of great examples of unintended consequences. But there's also the intended consequences. So we ask people to give us that and say we're going to measure. Then people value that, and they're thinking that okay, this proposal got rejected, but I'm doing this, and this counts towards something. A friend of mine once told me that she tried to get her kids to help fold the laundry by paying them some amount by how high the stack of folded things was. So you wouldn't believe how creative they could be in getting it like one towel to fold up this high. It would be folded 25 times, so it would go that high. That's a great example of getting what you measure. But that's what we're after. We're after measuring things that have the intended consequences and being mindful about the unintended consequences.
So I'm thinking about, I'm Mary Beth Willett, I'm thinking about how do we measure what goes beyond our borders? Yeah. So if, you know, we've done these research projects and they've been successful and how have they impacted the greater community? And also for graduates, if we want them to take what this gentleman over here said about, you know, creating jobs, or how did it impact the state and beyond the borders? Did they go out and do other research? You know, I was just thinking, how are we gonna, if we could see how many people, do we poll them? Do we see how many people are linking to the research at University of Maine, or you know, things like that?
Oh, that's a great, how many jobs are created? How many, you could measure the economic impact of it. You could look at, or we could look at graduates 5 years out. But how many companies have they created? What are these secondary things that are impacting? And again, you could also look at the broader things, which I think Dee was getting at. Our graduates, how many are on town council? How many are in these volunteer organizations? How many, are doing these kinds of things that we value and we talk about and I think we foster here. But again, how do we measure them? Ron.
One thing I think in terms of change in the public's perception of us is that an indicator would be that our faculty, staff, researchers are used much more in the media and in the public as experts in their particular field. I mean, if you hear them on NPR or whatever, that they're out there more and they're seen more as thought leaders and experts in their fields.
Yeah, that's great. So counting and saying, this many times our faculty were drawn on, and how do we measure it, but then there's a way to show the impact and to get at this perception thing that we're concerned about. One of the things, someone pointed this out, not me, and it was, I thought, a good idea. We do a lot around announcements when people get awards or get grants, and then when they do all the hard work, and we don't do a lot around, and here was the impact of the grant when it's over. And we should be very mindful of that, of looking at that after the fact, right? We talk about what so-and-so's getting $12 million, and it is something to celebrate, but what happened? And there's been a lot of conversation about trying to do a better job of talking about that impact.
So I sort of like this idea now that we're going to count what we're not good at, or not necessarily not success, right? So to the point of a couple of those things, if we talk about the number of students who take their first job in Maine, but what if we talked about the students who don't? And that's how you find out what they're doing there and beyond, right? And if you talked about experts being cited, but if we looked at every article that we weren't cited and said, could we have been or should we have been, is that a way to start thinking about increasing that penetration?
We start counting all the articles we're not cited in, and then we say, okay, how do we address that? Sarah.
I think that if we could measure resilience in our students, that owning our failure narratives will help build resilience in our students, because they will start to recognize that it's okay for them to fail too, and that's part of the process. And as our students are becoming resilient, I think it will contribute to dealing with mental health problems on our campus. So I think if we look at counseling centers' crisis numbers and the number of transports for hospitalizations and things like that, that if we're doing this work and it's helping retention, it's helping resilience, that those numbers will go down.
That's great. Thank you. Other thoughts? Owen.
I think one of the things that we often ignore when we talk about failure is really, what is the value of failure? And the value of failure is really an indicator of our ability to be responsive to things that we do not know, have not foreseen, and surprise us, and the ability to be responsive and change makers. So I would say a key indicator of success, if we think about this, is the creation of faculty, students, and staff who are change agents and who are able to be positively responsive to things which we do not currently know.
Excellent. That's great. All right. So I'm going to give Owen the first and last comment, which I try not to do for anybody, but I want to keep us on time. This is very, very, very helpful. Again, we're collecting these just so you have a sense of where the heck are we going with all this. This isn't your last opportunity to have input into this. You can log on and go to the president's website and it'll say something about strategic visioning. Click there. There's opportunities for you to, if you get up in the middle of the night and say, you know what, I got a great goal. You can go there and click it. We're also going to be asking the campus in a more formal way. If those who came to our first the first session we had, where President Free Money and I kicked this off, we said what we wanted to do is create sort of open forums like this and open forums like our online forums, but then also work within our organizational structure to get information. So I have a draft. I've got a work on a little bit. But I'll be sending the deans information. I'm sending, not information, I'm sending deans saying, I'm charging you to go within your units and examine these strategic values. Do they capture it? Should we have a fourth one? How might we re-articulate this? And then also outside of academia, the folks in Lizzie Wahab is going to go and say, everyone who reports to her, how we're going to get input from those folks, and Jake Ward and Chris in HR. So we're going to try to do this through multiple attempts and directions. And we realize that some things that folks might say at this kind of session, if they have to work up through their department and unit, that voice may not be heard, or it may not match the consensus, and that's fine. We still want to hear it. But we also are interested in the consensus. So, what does, I'm looking at Mike, even though you're not chair anymore, what does the Department of Psychology think of this, right? And do they have some ideas that represent the department? Each individual unit member can still tell us what they think, even though they think all their colleagues are crazy. We are interested in what their colleagues think too. And one of the things we're very committed to is getting as many voices into this process as we can. That's one of the other reasons we also want to work through the mechanisms that we have. I really appreciate you all taking the time to join this, and the folks who are watching on Zoom and writing things in. But I also recognize that you're a small percentage of our population, and you deserve extra credit and a louder voice because you got here. But we do want to we're going to take the extra step to reach out to everyone who can. So that means because you were here, you're going to have multiple chances, because your chair or your director or someone is going to be asking you some variation of these questions, and so you'll have more opportunity to get at it. We're going to continue this conversation. So we kicked it off on the 15th. That one's over. We did the 29th. We did fostering learner success. Today we did this. Next week we're back, and we're going to be talking about growing and stewarding partnerships. I talked about when actually Jim Artizzani brought it up, and I talked about it a little bit in terms of us having a regional campus now. But we want to think about partnerships very, very broadly, and we want to recognize that, again, one of the realities of higher education now is that if our typical or historical, I guess, ways of being funded and of operating are not going to keep pace. They already don't keep pace, and they're not going to keep pace as you look forward. We can't solve our problems by saying the state ought to give us more money. We can say that, but it's not going to work. We are going to try to get funds from the state, but it'll never keep pace. We need to be thinking about partnerships and how we create win-wins with other educational institutions, not just the other University of Maine system campuses, although that's important, but K-12, the community college, privates. We want to think about how do we partner with business and industry to advance the research mission. We want to be thinking about how we partner with folks from outside of our state. Someone, they laughed, they suggested internationally sponsored research. So we want to think very, very broadly. I think that's got to be part of what we're about as we're moving forward to be successful, is that we need to do more things in partnership. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and along the lines we did today. Do we capture the language right? What goals should we have? How should we try to set up strategies to succeed there? As I already indicated, anytime, day or night, you have a thought, you can send it here. There are sort of different kind of questions, but you can ignore the question if you want to. Just write whatever you think. There's opportunities. And then I'll remind you, we're encouraging pop-up dialogues. The idea that we're having these forums, and as I already said, we're working through the way the university is organized to have conversations. But one of the things that came up today was the importance of interdisciplinary work. So if we only ask the psych department what they think, that's not going to get at interdisciplinary. So we're mindful of that, and we're encouraging folks to get together across areas on this campus to discuss and generate ideas and provide input. If you need help in doing that, if you need help finding space, or maybe even buy you coffee, to get a group together, ask and go through my office, and I'll see what I can do to provide support if you want to bring folks together at a little larger scale. But even if it's having lunch with somebody at the union, we're encouraging that any kind of dialogue around this topic. Our goal is really to create a kind of a culture over the next few months where people are thinking about the university's future. and thinking about how do we get there. And we all know that, you know, some of our best ideas happen at the oddest times. We wanted you to you know, take advantage of that and use that. Talk to a friend, send us a message, say, you know what, let's get these 3 other people together just to kick this idea around. We strongly encourage you to do that. We're going to go and travel to University of Maine Machias and have a little longer session, the president and I and Andy Egan. The folks, they've been connected with us via Zoom for both of these sessions. When we're at Machias, we're going to set up here for folks to be connected by Zoom from here. I'm encouraging and inviting people. We'll get information out about that closer to the time. But as you listen, we encourage anyone to listen to that conversation. We'll set it up so you can send in text messages and thoughts there as well, so that we can try our best to have a true interaction between ours and our regional campus. So, thank you all very much for joining me. Anyone have a last question or comment to close out the day? If not, thank you. I really appreciate you coming.